Hello and welcome to the Dev Method. Today we're going to talk about signing in with Apple ID on iOS, native Swift development. So I have a couple of websites set up for us so we can take a look at a couple of the different steps, the different documentation to get from start to finish. And then we're going to take a look at what Apple has actually put online, which is a demo project. It's all something that's very new to me and probably some of you, and it's going to be required sooner than later to put on all of your websites and your logins. So for example, if you have a login right now that is a Gmail or Google login, or maybe a Facebook login, you need to have Apple ID sign in as well. The idea here is that it respects the privacy, it has the built-in security so you don't have to build your own authentication. And then it works on all your different Apple devices, and then also works on the web, which is a big one if you want to get into a website. And then you have this added protection of anti-fraud. So when I was looking at this website, I actually found toward the bottom is like a learn more link. And I eventually got here, which is making the sign-in easy. And there's tips and tricks how to plan, look at the guidelines, look at the App Store review. And then there's a bunch of things about implementing it. The biggest thing that I find just for me as a user that might be helpful and understand why it exists is that there's the email relay service. A lot of the other sign-in providers like Google or Facebook, you sign in with your email account, and there's really no clear picture about what you're actually sharing with those people. So with Apple ID sign-in, what they're doing is actually taking the user email and allowing the user to choose whether they want to share that email address with that company, or if they want to have like a secret email or like an email that is non-identifiable. And it goes to this email relay service. So we're going to look at how to implement it with this framework called AuthenticationServices on your Mac and on your iPhone and on your tvOS and your watch. I've actually never walked through this example download, so this is really kind of a test to see if the example really makes sense, at least for me. Maybe it'll make sense for you. But the whole idea here is that we're using the latest Xcode, and we're going to download this example. We're going to walk through it together. We're going to learn together. We'll probably make some mistakes and we'll figure it out. Cool. It's got a README. Sweet. All right. This sample app is Juice. It uses the authentication frameworks, all that other stuff. So the easiest thing to do to try to start doing when you first have this is run this on a device. I'll choose an iPhone 11. I'm always curious, what's in the app delegate? Anything special? Let's see. Oh, yeah, here we go. Okay. Whoa. All right, cool. Okay, so that's what it looks like. So I usually have, I have programmatic views that I create, but these main views, these main storyboards, great way to see visually how things line up and where you're going to go from. And if I click on one of these, so I could see if I hover over one of those icons, it says Login View Controller. I bet that lines up with this Swift file Login View Controller, and look at that, it does. So we got a Login View Controller, and as I scroll down, I'm looking at View Did Load, View did appear, and then I have a lot of custom stuff underneath with nice, English written sentences so that I can understand what the code is doing. So I can see here, we got a lot there, and then we got the result view controller. So that's probably the screen right behind here, that one way over there. And I bet when we segue to it, or when we push this information to the Apple ID authentication and come back, this is really just going to help us set up some of these things. So it looks like right now that one, for the purposes of the demo, delete the user identifier that was previously stored in the keychain. So that's what it does here. And then it says clear the user interface. So it's just setting each of these labels to blank text or empty strings. And then it wants to show the login view controller on dispatch main async. Okay. Well, let's not necessarily go into that, but let's go here with login view controller. So the first thing I look at, I have a stack view. Cool. So I have a setup provider login. This view did load will only load once on a view controller. For you guys who use UIKit, that's something you need to know. Load once. And then did appear can be called multiple times. In this case, when we're looking at the application, it probably is just calling, this one particular time. But it could call multiple times, depending on your application. And the first thing it does, it runs this code, setup provider login view. So here's what it says it does. So it adds the Apple ID button. So that's right here. Okay. So we have a button, which is actually provided by the service. So that's kind of cool. So that is an AS authorization Apple ID button. It's like a particular button. Usually what I like to do too is I want to dive in a little bit deeper. I give a click right here and I do Control Command J, jump right into some of the generated headers for the Swift interface. And this is a subclass of a UI control. I have an initializer. And then I have a corner radius I can set. So that's probably the styling right around here. Then I'll hit this back button, go back a step. Okay, so what it's doing is it's setting a target. So this is target action on UIKit. And it's saying go to this method. So this method is way down here, right there, for touch up inside. So that means when I touch down and then lift up, it's going to call that method. It's not going to pass any arguments to it. And that's what setup login view does. That's all it does. So we'll come back to that method later, what happens after the fact. But going in order, so our IB outlets are set. That's this view here. And then it says perform existing account setup flows. So if I look here, it says prompts the user if an existing iCloud Keychain credential or Apple ID credential is found. So, prepare requests for both Apple ID and password providers. So I have two requests, it's in an array. Hold down Option, click on request, see what the type is. It is an array of AS authorization request. And we have one for create request. So two different ones. And one is a Apple ID provider and one is a password provider. So I bet this one is the one that we're more focused on here. This one's probably for something else, such as the iCloud keychain. And then it says create authorization controller with given requests. And what do we have here? Let me close this on the side here. Just click this button. See more of the code. Close that there. All right, so we have a controller. Creates an authorization controller. Notice it's not a view controller, just a controller. We set a delegate, and then we provide a presentation context provider. Both of these things are self, so it means if I go back up to the top, I bet my view controller is implementing some sort of protocol. And then we have here perform requests. I wonder what this is. So if I hold on Option, got this little question mark that hovers over it, click on it, I'll see the documentation. So it starts the authorization flows named during controller initialization. So the ones that were named, let's go back here. The ones that were named are this Apple ID provider and authorization password provider. And see, they were passed in here as the authorization requests. And if I look here, I do an Option click on that parameter there, creates a view controller from a collection of authorization requests. One or more authorization requests that this controller can perform. So this one here, when it says perform it, says it starts that flow. So we pass those two things in and it starts that flow. And then we got additional discussion here. So I got these delegates that are set up here. Now, what is the order after this? So usually you don't necessarily know, at least not by looking at this right away. If this says perform existing account setup flow, I'm expecting some sort of side effect from this. And there is a controller that's set up here. And we have the delegate, but we don't like hold a strong pointer to this controller. So I suppose like when we perform this, the strong pointers are actually set on us, self, which is the login view controller. Now these, this delegate here, this is a authorization controller delegate, and then a authorization controller presentation context providing. So it says it's weak, but it looks like it's still gonna work. All right, well, let's scroll down a little bit more. Yep, here's the controller delegate. Looks like if it did complete the authorization, that's where this is gonna get called. And then we have our own private function here, so that's a custom thing to this. And then we have another private function, another custom thing that was set up here for just to be simple. And another custom function here, we'll skip over that. And then here's a did complete with error. Sometimes these are not required. So let's do an option click on that. Yeah, see, this is optional function. So if you're using Swift with some of the Objective-C APIs, which I know this is, then this is a common thing to have optional methods that you can implement. Now, I would say if it's in real life, a real life application, do not ignore these. Don't think that there'll never be errors. There will be errors. You just won't see them maybe when you're developing or maybe when it's in testing, but you will see them at some point. So at the very least, you need to log it. Put it in somewhere. Put it in your database table. I don't know. Put it somewhere where you can see it. What I'll do is I'll just do a print. And then I usually give like this authorization controller error. And I'll put it in here. So if anything, I at least see what the error is and understand what it's doing. Now, normally, if it's from the Objective-C APIs, this error is probably an NS error. So there's like an error code and a description, a localized description. Most likely, you don't necessarily want to put this in your UI and show directly to the user. This is more for like developer and debugging. So you're going to want to put this in here so that you can start learning what the errors actually are. And then you can actually map it out to your own either new flow, like a new screen or a new UI that comes up, or maybe a new copy, something different you want to say. You don't want to necessarily say like, oh, an error happened with the database. Like users don't care about that, right? What you're probably going to want to say is like, hey, sorry, this is computers, things get weird sometimes. You're gonna say sorry, try again. Okay, so the next thing is the presentation providing. This is probably more than aesthetic than anything else, but it is saying it is the view's self window, which is interesting. That's interesting API. This is an AS presentation anchor. So I guess like UI window implements AS presentation anchor. Yeah, which kind of makes sense because you can have actually multiple instances of your UI for the one application at the same time on an iPad. So that makes sense. We're not really going to pay attention to that one. But then the last one, which again, I don't know why this is necessarily shown here, but it says show login view controller. It's opening up main and then showing the login view controller via the, let's see, instantiate view controller with identifier. Okay. And it knows it's a login view controller. So it's got the presentation set up and then it presents it. So this is actually ourself login view controller. Okay, so what we've learned so far is that this example has only got two view controllers. We got the view did load on the login view controller, and then we have the view did appear in the login view controller. There's some setup code to set up a touch event. So we have this touch event here. So touch up inside means when they touch down, and then as soon as they lift up, that message is being sent to this method here. Handle authorization, Apple ID button pressed. Kind of long, but that's where it is. And no arguments passed to it. The other part to it is that we perform an existing account setup flow. And to do that, we're using the built-in API for AS Authorization Controller. We're giving it two requests. One is a Apple ID, and then the other one is for iCloud Keychain credential, which is that second one there. Okay, so I loaded up the application, I ran it, and now on the right-hand side, I see I have sign in with Apple ID. Let me click that, see what it says. Okay, you need an Apple ID in your settings. Got the Apple ID set up. Let's try again, sign in with Apple ID. Oh, look at this, a nice little greeting. This is exactly what the user is going to see the very first time they try Apple ID sign in. Not necessarily with your app, but any app that uses Apple ID sign in. Fast and easy, respects privacy, hides your email. Sounds great. I'm in. Ah, yes. All right, so I'll blur this stuff out too. But we have the email, and then we have an option to select an email. So you can have multiple emails registered to your Apple IDs. So we could do that. We actually share the real ID or real email. And then we have hide. Well, I know this is a demo app, but I really don't want to get my email out to these people. I'm kind of skeptical. I just downloaded this from the App Store. I don't know who these people are. They haven't seen me. They don't know me. I don't know them. I'm going to do hide my email. I can change this later, I suppose, right? All right, there we go. Okay, I'll blur this out, but put in my password. Get the password going. All right. So I'll blur out that user ID, but that's my user ID that I've been given and that I can store in my database somewhere, and that means I can identify who that is. And if I have an app that actually uses an email, like email feature, says like, hey, come back to our app because this happened. You know, your order is complete. That's going to be the email. So far so good. And I sign out. Click on that. Oh, it looks like it went right back. All right, so this is pretty easy. It looks like to me, at least. So what else needs to be set up in your account? Well, if I was to go to the, so we have the bundle identifier, and let's see. So this is for iPhone and iPad right now, but we could also include the Mac. So if you are going to be using this framework, you will need to add this to your project. You need to add the framework here under Frameworks, Libraries, and Embedded Content. Yeah, you click this button here. Well, anyways, this one's already added to the demo project for you. And then you need to go to Sign In and Capabilities. Right now, I'm not technically signed in, but I was able to at least test it out on the simulator without doing any of that. So that's actually great. You choose your team here. And then sign in with Apple ID. That's an option here too. So if you click on Add Capabilities, there's also this autofill credential provider. So why don't we go back to the code? Let's count how many classes we need to know. So the first class that I see is this one. We'll put it up here in the notes. We need a button. Okay, that's what this guy is here. 2, this controller with an array of this. That there. See? Let me zoom in so you can see. See? 1, need the button, need the controller, and you're going to give it this provider. Okay? And as far as I can tell, it's a create request. So it's going to give you back this type here. So I'll put in here what the type is so you can see that. See, say AS Authorization Apple ID request. I do the delegate, right? Oh, and look at that. So we didn't talk about what happens when you press it. So we got the provider again, and then we have the request, and then we request with scopes. Okay, create the controller again, and add the delegates, perform the request. Okay, that sounds fine to me. So it's almost exactly the same as what we have here, except in this case, this handles what the Apple ID button is actually doing. And yeah, so let's see, what other scopes are there, right? Let's look at the scopes. Okay, so we got email and full name. All right, well, those are all your scopes. So you use one or more of these values in the request scopes array that you can configure in an instance of either the Apple ID request or the single sign-in request. So these are the 2 bits of information that you can request from the user. So that's the max. And then you put it in here in the request, perform the request. So we didn't really look into the delegate and what that's doing, but let's say we did. So we have Authorization Controller, did complete with authorization, and it passes in this authorization object. So we're going to need to know about that. We need to know about that object. So what is the authorization? If I held down Option on the keyboard, hovered over AS Authorization, click on it, the encapsulation of a successful authorization performed by a controller. Okay, so this thing here is the thing that performed the successful authorization. And it's doing a switch on a credential. So what is the credential? Ooh, that's another one. We need to know about this one too. So many things to know. All right. 4. All right, let's review the list real quick. So we need the AS Authorization Apple ID button. That's that button there. Then we need to make a controller with an array of a request. So we're going to use the Authorization Apple ID provider. Okay. And if it's successful, because we're the delegate. Oh, we should put in the delegate. We are the delegate of this. We'll make this the new 3. We'll make this 4. Okay. All right, so we need to be a delegate so that we can get the authorization. That's this method here. Let me put that in our notes too. All right, so that is the authorization controller passes in the controller that did this authorization, and it did complete the authorization. So what are you expected to do? Well, you're expected to look at the credential. There's a .credential here. And you have a couple of cases. The first case here is that the credential could be an authorization Apple ID credential. So if I'm looking at this for the first time, I'm guessing this implements this interface, or it's a subclass of it. So let's take a look real quick. And the way we can figure that out, scroll back down to that switch case right here. Okay. Oh, no, see, yeah, that's just an NS object. Okay. And what is this here? This option, clicked on it. Protocol. So it does implement that. That's what this does. So we get a credential, and then we can, we switch on the case. The other case, let's just take a look, because we also had another option here with Apple ID and then versus the iCloud sign-in, right? So that's the other option. So there's a password credential. We're going to skip that from now. But we have the user, and then we have the full name, and then we have the email, okay? And now we have the save user in Keychain. So we'll take a look at what that does in a second. And then we have a show results view controller. So I kind of wish these were really just in here, like right in line, but essentially you're getting the semantic of it. So we're going to save something in the keychain, save the user in the keychain, and then we're going to show the result view controller. So let's pop back out. So remember, this is what happened because we were the delegate of the authorization controller, because the user tapped up or touch up on the handle authorization Apple ID button press, right? And here is the case that it fell into. There's nothing after that, but that's the case that it fell into. And from that case, it did a save user in keychain. And so I'm looking here, there's a keychain item. So if you want to look up that, you might need to know that. Let's take a look at that. Save keychain item. And this is the identifier for the application. So if you don't know what yours is, you go here to the project and you look it up right there. Now, after that, it shows the result view controller. And it does this with a user identifier, and then the full name, and then the email. So it's just passing a copy of the string to the next view controller. I bet that's what it's doing. Let's take a look here. Yeah, see, the presenting view controller is the result view controller. And then it's doing this on the main thread. It's actually queuing it up to do asynchronously later. View controller, which just does this. I don't know, if I was writing this, I probably wouldn't do it that way. Yeah, so let's try it without. Tutorial code, am I right? Continue. Okay, works. All right. This is the email. privaterelay.appleid.com. It is giving the name. You got my name. But you can't have the rest of me. Okay, thanks guys for joining in today on the Dev Method. We took a look at signing in with the Apple ID on your native iOS application using Swift. We took a look at a couple of different API that you at least want to get familiar with and want to know. And we'll have some links in the description about what it is that you want to look at when it comes to documentation. There's probably more that you need to know that is not displayed here, especially if you're going to integrate this into an application that's already created for you. So in that case, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I will answer them. And give a like if you like this video. And thanks for watching. See you later.